Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to do lesson 13. Lesson 13 covers exploring the uses of effects and graphic styles. But more importantly, I think anyway, it involves using the appearance panel. The appearance panel I briefly talked about before, but it enables you to apply multiple effects and strokes and fills to a single path. So that's what we're going to be doing today. This is the finished illustration. Okay, it's a little poster for an art fest or an art show. They've already given us all the parts. And now what we're going to do is to enhance its appearance a little bit with some gradients, with some graphic styles and effects, which are found, most of the effects are found up here. I will briefly explain right now that there are two kinds of effects. There are Adobe Illustrator effects and Photoshop effects. Photoshop effects are generally applied to bitmap images. They don't have to be, but they are a little bit different than the ones that you see here for Illustrator effects, which are vector effects. Okay. I opened up the appearance panel. If I go back over here and I reset my Essentials Classic, okay, where you will find it is right here, graphic styles, boom, like so. And under graphic styles, you'll also see the appearance panel. I'm going to tear the appearance panel off. We will be using graphic styles a little bit later. Graphic styles is, by the way, are a way of taking a collection of appearances and combining them so that you can use them and reuse them again and again. I also want to bring up layers. I'll just put layers down here just so we can see. As we click on different images, the layers will automatically be selected, and we don't need to work with layers here. So anyway, this is what it's supposed to look like when it's done. Here, in effect, is the start file. And we're going to start by creating and enhancing the background. Now, with the appearance panel visible, you can see if I click on the little twirlies here and I close them, we have, what you would think, a typical stroke and fill. And if I want to come in here and I can select the stroke, okay, I can click up here and I can specify that I don't want any stroke. Okay, and click up here and let's just say that I don't want any at all. So I'll just say 0. Or what I can do here, rather than specify the width of it, just say that I don't want any at all. There we go. So that goes away. You'll also notice that a drop shadow has been added. I can either leave that or throw it away. That comes at the bottom here under effects. You can add effects from here. So you can either turn any of these off at any time, turn them back on, and in a little bit later, we're going to be adding multiple fills and multiple strokes to some of these. So I'm going to go ahead and take the effect. And with it selected, I'm going to go ahead and drop shadow. I'm just going to remove it for the time being. And I'll be going back and forth just to see what they have here and see that they removed it from here. But now what I can do is I can select the fill. I'm going to click on the little fill button here and click up here. And what they want is the little pink fill for that. Okay, so we give that. Now, in addition to that, what I want to be able to do is add a pattern on top of it. Now, in the past, before we had the appearance panel to add multiple effects to individual items or shapes on our in our illustration, you would have to copy this shape, paste it directly on top, and then apply the separate effect. But instead, what I can do is I can take this one and I can either deselect or I can just copy it. I can take this one and I can drag it onto the new. Notice that I have a duplicate fill now, one layered on top of the other. And just as we layer items in the layers panel, we can layer effects on top of one another. So for example, if I go ahead and I click and I drag this one and put it beneath, okay, so I'll select this one here. And instead, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to apply a pattern to this. I don't know which one is which. This is Gravel Beach. This is, I think it's the crosses that go in here, okay? And it looks like I've done absolutely nothing. But if I go ahead and I click on this and I move it above, you can see that that little cross pattern sits on top of the pink background now. So that's how that works, okay? Again, we can add multiple strokes if we wish. I can add additional fills on top of this, but remember, you need to make sure that elements of them are transparent so you can see through them. Otherwise, just like with typical layers, one will block another, okay? So that's how that works. The next thing that we're going to do now is we're going to work on the, we're going to work on the type here. So we're going to edit appearance attributes. So instead of selecting the background, what I might want to do with that background, since we're not going to use it anymore, is I can go ahead and I can lock it just so I don't accidentally select it. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to select the type. Now you'll see that it says type is selected. If I double click on it, then it gives me the characters, it gives me the stroke, and it gives me the fill. Now, if I want to click here, let's see what happens if I select black. And it doesn't do anything. But if I highlight all of it and I come back in here and I select black, now it works. Okay. But when I'm ready to add multiple fills and multiple strokes, then what I need to do, it has to be done from later on from the selection the selection tool, not from the type tool. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to double click. And by double clicking on type, it brings that back up. And I'm going to switch from that fill to the gold fill here. Now I should select it all, because if I don't do that, see, it has a question mark for the fill. So I'll go ahead and I'll select that. What I also want to do now is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to apply a stroke to it. And the first stroke that I'm going to apply is going to be the green. And we're just going to use 1 point. Now, if I click off of this, you can see it's very subtle. We can zoom in a little bit. It's a little green, and this will become important later on, because when I click back over here, you can see that it appears to be a green drop shadow that's been added. So this might take a couple of tries for me to use the settings that they've applied, but we'll see. Hopefully I can get it in one shot. Then in addition to that, I want to take the stroke and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate it. I mean, if I deselect, I can go ahead and I can take it and I prefer just dragging it on top. So I have a duplicate. And on top of this, I'm going to go ahead, instead of green, I'm going to apply the white. Okay. But I'm going to change the stroke color to 5 point. There we go. So let me go ahead and make sure that in here, that by clicking back on the selection tool, see, everything should be selected or should be done. So I'm going to go back here and I'm going to take this one. I'm going to try this again, because with type, it's a little bit different. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, take this one with the selection tool. There we go. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to duplicate this one. And now I'm going to change this. And since it's on top, we'll make it white. And I should change it. I hope. Let's go back again. 4 or 5, and it's not working. So I'm going to go back to the type tool. And I need to switch to multiple strokes. So why it's not changing, I don't know. So I'm going to pause for a minute. So with active type, it requires that you do something a little bit different to be able to add multiple strokes and multiple fills. Anyway, what you need to do at the bottom here is I was copying it and that doesn't work so well. Copying the additional layers, you have to do it from here. So what I want to do is I want to add a new stroke. And now that comes up and you can see the default stroke that it added was black. Well, I'm going to click on the black and I'm going to apply the green to that. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I want to have multiple strokes. So again, I'm going to do it again from here at the bottom. And I'm going to say, I want a new stroke. So I can leave this 1.1 at the bottom and, or I can change the one at the top and I want it to be 5 point. And this one is going to be white now. So we have that and we still have the one that's hidden under here. I can, if I want, reorder this. And you can see that there is a little green stroke that's aligned to the center and it applies it to both, with the selection tool to all of the type. Now, I don't have to highlight the type. So I'm going to put the stroke, the green stroke, back beneath the white one. Okay. There we go. So that's hidden down there. And then what I want to do is I want to take the fill again, and I'm going to, right now I have no fill, but what I do want to do is I want to make sure that that yellow is applied to it from here, not from the type itself that I had before. And then what I can do to this or to the entire shape is that I can apply an effect. And that can be done from down here, or I can go to the effects. And what I want to do is I want to apply under stylize, I want to apply a drop shadow. So I'm going to try it from here. We can click here and you can see that all of the same effects that I showed you in the drop down menu exists here as well, both Illustrator and Photoshop. Under stylize, I want to go ahead and I'm going to add drop shadow. Notice that appears. So let's go ahead. I'm probably getting ahead just a little bit. So I did that, but it doesn't hurt using the effects. I can go ahead and do that from right here. I can do that. I mean, we're going to do it later. Let me cancel that. I want to follow the book. So I've added my strokes to that. Now we're going to add a drop shadow to another area here, but we are going to add a drop shadow to the text. We'll come back to that. So what I want to do now is I'm going to take the paintbrush handle, just select it again, and I'm going to add an effect to that. And that's going to be under stylize. So I'll go ahead and I'll add drop shadow to that. They want us to change the settings a little bit. We're going to change the opacity, and you notice that we have a bunch of them of settings that we can change from here. I'm going to change this to 50%, not 75, which is the default. And then the offset for each of them, I want 0.14. So I'm going to put 0.14 and 0.14. There we go. We want the color to be black. And blur, 0.21. So there we go. So we have a nice soft shadow, drop shadow that applies there. And you'll notice as we're applying some of these effects, let me click OK. And we come over here and we look at the paintbrush layer. I click in here. You can see that the little appearance dot over here shows that a targeted drop shadow has been applied to that. Okay, little drop shadow. So that works out pretty nice. Now we're going to come back to the effects that we did in the text. See, by just with the selection tool, selecting the text, I get my appearance showing up here. And one of the first things that they want us to do, which is really pretty cool, is we can apply a warp effect to it. And I think they want us to use rise, so I'll do that. Okay, and that's really exaggerated. That's set to 50%. I need that to go back to maybe 10% or 15. Let's see how that looks pretty good. Again, I jumped ahead a little bit again. So we have the white or the outline that's sort of missing now. So I'm going to leave that at 15%. And then I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you can always add it, at any time you want. I'm going to go ahead and add an effect, and I'll go back and I'll add the drop shadow to this now. So let's go ahead and add, again, stylize drop shadow. That looks nice. Now notice how the outline of the type pops up quite nicely. So in this one, we're going to use 10% opacity. So it's going to be very light, 10%. And we want to use a blur of 0.03. 0.03. So it's very, very subtle and very light. I believe the other settings we're going to leave alone, the offset. So I added the warp effect, which is really pretty cool. Again, those are editable, so you can always go back and change them at any time. And you'll notice as we're adding the effect to these that like the drop shadow effect, if I want to go back and change that, I click here and it will we can come back and we can change those settings. Likewise, the warp, which is added to the top here. Again, if I click on warp rise, if I want to come back in here and I want to change it to another one, like the arc, I can do that, or any of these that are here. I think it's worthwhile for you to explore them to see what they do and what the possibilities are. So I'm going to go back and select rise again so that it fits the underlying banner that we have here. So other effects that we're going to apply to this. Now, what we want to do, because we still have that hidden green stroke that we want to bring out here. So I'm going to apply an effect to this. Let's change this. What I can do is I can temporarily turn off the warp effect. I don't have to. Let me go back here. Let's select that. Whoops. So I'm temporarily turning that off. And we're going to change and we're going to edit the type. So that makes another nice feature that we have available to us here, that I can highlight it like so. And instead of art show, we want it to be art fest. So I only need to change the bottom here. So everything is editable. It's really, really very nice. So now I can come back. Okay, come back to here. Notice how it's been updated. I can go back and turn fest back on. But to do that, I need to change the horizontal, and let's see what we're going to do here. No, I need to change the bend to 11% now. I had it a little bit more. So let's go back to rise. I had it at 15. I'm going to change it to 11. And that should fit, there you go, a little bit better than what we had before. Then what we're going to do here is I'm going to apply some other effects to this. And one of the effects that we want to select, because we want the green to appear as a drop shadow, is we're going to use offset path. So with this selected, I'm going to go under here, and I want it to appear under path. I want offset path. So this is kind of a unique feature here that, to be quite honest, I rarely use. So I'm going to use a minus. I want it to be a minus 0.13. And why? Because the book tells me to. Okay. And that's what that does. Okay. So that changes that considerably. So I'm going to change that path, and I'm going to put it down here underneath. So that I'm going to actually apply that to the stroke. Now what I want to do with, in the transform effect, hold on here 1 second here. So I believe I put the transform or the offset path in the right location. But now what we want to do is add to the stroke. We're going to go ahead and we're going to boost it up to 5 point. And then we're going to add another effect to it. And what we want to add is under transform. Here, let's go. Under distort and transform, we're going to select transform. What we want to do is we're going to add under copies, we want 10. There we go. And under 10, I'm going to make sure that the horizontal move, because we used that offset before, is 0.013. And here 0.013. We have preview set. So let's see what happens here. I want to go ahead and click OK. And that's not what I wanted, because I want the stroke. Okay, let's move this down. Nope, that's not quite right. So hold on here. So I skipped a step. I'm supposed to take the offset path to the banner. So I'm going to go ahead and select the top banner, and we're going to go ahead and under effect, or we can add the effect here. Make sure that the path is selected, and we'll go ahead and add that effect. And we want under path, we're going to select offset path, and that's going to be 0.13. There we go. So that's offset just a little bit. Okay, so now we can come back to the type. So what I want to do with the type is I did add the transform to it, but it's not working. So let me change the width of this just a little bit from 5 point. Let's see if that has an effect. Let's select the stroke up here. Yeah. So again, something is a little bit amiss here. So I'll come back and I'll fix it. So to get the look we're going for, what I decided to do was to, if I have the fill above the white stroke, this is what it looks like. And that works okay, but I'm going to go ahead and beef that stroke up just a little bit. Make it look a little bit better. And you can see that it appears that the green now, by using the transform feature, if I select that, and let's see, the green stroke, if I select transform and we used a move, a horizontal move, horizontal and vertical. It takes that stroke and duplicates it. And we added 10 copies of that to create kind of a drop shadow for that. I think there's a better way of doing that. I would do it a little bit differently than the book, but it works so that it's all, for us, all of the features that have been added to the stroke or to the text are under one appearance, and that's it. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to now apply a Photoshop effect so that the brush in the back here, hopefully, well, that layer is locked, so I don't want that. Let's unlock the layer. Let's select, there we go. I want the paint stroke here, and we want to apply an effect to the fill. So we'll go to the effect. We're going to use a Photoshop effect. And so under the applying the Photoshop effect, what we're going to do is we're going to use brush stroke. We're going to use sprayed strokes. Okay, so under brush strokes, sprayed strokes. And when you use a Photoshop effect, it brings up kind of a sub-menu and or an alternate kind of window for us to make our final adjustments. And you'll notice that if you want, you can select angled strokes, you can select crosshatch, and some of these work and some of them don't. So what you want to do is we wanted the sprayed strokes. That's the one that we want. And what we want to do is stroke length is we want to be 20, the radius to be 25, and we want the stroke direction to be vertical. And it gives us the illusion of kind of a dry brush effect. And when I'm happy with those settings, then I can go ahead and I can click OK. And you can see that it's been added to that and that have that transparent look so we can still see around the border, so we can see the background through that. So that's kind of nice. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create our own custom graphic style. So graphic styles, if I click right here, that's that window. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pull it off just so we can see that. Now there's a few of them that are already kind of preset. Okay, we have the default graphic style that can be selected for anything. We have here RGB canvas, and we have a drop shadow that can be added. Now, one of the things that you can do that we're going to add to this today is we're going to add to an entire layer, we're going to add a drop shadow. But before we do, what we're going to do is we're going to take this particular banner, and I want to be able to apply the same features that I applied to that to this banner here. So to make sure that I don't make any mistakes, what I can do is I can select that and I can select the little plus button here under graphic styles. And that just added that. So now I can select this one, and without having to look at the settings that I used or any of the other features, I can go ahead and I can apply it to that one. And that works really nicely. So I can deselect that and I'm set to go. Now, at any time, if you want to change any of these, because if I come back in here and I decide instead of the yellow stroke, I want to apply the green to it, okay? And let's go ahead and let's change some other features of that. Let's go ahead and apply. So I applied this. Yeah, hold on here. So notice that I just changed the stroke of, after I added that graphic style, I decided to come back in here and change the stroke to the light green. In order for this to work, you have to make sure that the offset, if I put the offset at the very top, notice that the stroke goes all the way to the edge. I want it to be inset. So I took the offset path and I pulled it down below the fill, actually not below the fill, goes above right here. Oh, come on, come on, come on. It goes. Hold on here. Make sure that the shape is selected, and I need to move the offset path down here below the stroke. Now you can see that the little green line is inset within the shape, which is kind of a nice effect. It isn't at the edge, so it adds a nice feature. Now, if I wanted to change the properties of this particular graphic style with this one selected, okay, what I want to do is I want to hold down the Option key, and I'm going to click and drag it on top of the old one. And notice how it updated the one that I have right here that I had before with just simply a yellow outline. So now I've applied and edited a graphic style. Likewise, one of the things that we can do is we can apply, for example, the drop shadow to just about anything if we want, an entire layer if we want. Before we do that, though, we're going to go ahead and we're going to look at this little logo here. And let's look at its properties. So this is a group. So if I select this, what we want to do is we want to make sure that when we make some changes to this and we scale it. So if I use the scale tool, I got to make sure that the whole thing is selected. I want to make sure the whole group. There we go. Notice that this is a huge path out here. That if I look at within the group contents, okay, we can see that there's mixed appearances in here. If I look inside this object itself, let's use the little twirly here and come down and see where we're at. And here's the group. So this has all been grouped together. And you can see that we have in here, if I turn this off, okay, this is just a fill with a stroke, okay? And then this little shape in here, which is another group, is of the little illustration in there. But when I resize this, so let's do this. If I go ahead and I use the scale tool, but I want to make sure that I select the whole, I got the whole group selected here. So let's select the whole group. And if I use the scale tool, so if I double click on scale, okay. Now, if I select uniform scaling, and right now I don't have scale, strokes, and effects selected. I only have transform objects and patterns. So if I scale this down to 50%, watch what happens. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see this a little better. Okay, so let me double click on the scale tool again. Now you can also, under stroke, whoops, let's cancel this here. You can also make sure that when I scale this, that you make sure that you have scale, strokes, and effects selected, but I don't want them selected right now. So I'm going to select that. And I'm going to change it from uniform, make sure that it's uniform scaling, but I'm going to use 50%. And let's go ahead and click on preview. Okay, notice that it scaled that, but it didn't scale the rest of it. So let's undo that. Let's go back. Let's go ahead and click cancel. And that brings that back. Now let's make sure again that I have the entire object selected, the entire group. Let's try this again. I don't think I had the interior selected. I had the I only had the interior selected, not the whole object. So let's try that again. I'm going to go ahead again under scale and transform objects. I'm going to go back to 50%. Okay. And notice how thick that is. Okay. I want to scale strokes and effects. So if I turn that on, notice that the stroke effect is reduced in proportion to what I just scaled it. So that is what I want. Sometimes you will need that, sometimes you won't. And remember, I said that you could also, let's go ahead and select the background here. And let's select, we have two fills, remember. So I'm going to target the pattern fill, and I'm going to double click on the scale tool here. Now, notice that if I click here, I want to transform patterns, but I don't want to transform the object. I only want to transform the pattern. Let's go ahead and scale. We don't want to scale strokes and effect, just the pattern. And notice that I reduced that to 50%. Well, what if I go back to 100%? That's much bigger. What if I change that to 200%? Now I have a much bigger pattern. So I'm not changing the strokes. I'm not changing any of the other effects, but I am changing the pattern inside it. So I'll cancel that and we'll go back to what we originally had. So anytime you double click on the transform tool, as well as some of the other tools, you can go back in and you can also adjust what you want to be transformed. Okay. So a couple more things that we have to do here. We're going to scale, I guess I skipped it by mistake. So what I want to do is I want to change the effects inside the, I can't remember what it's called. This part of that, the handle in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back. Let me stop for a second. And then what we're going to do is apply a metallic effect to it. And one of the things that you need to remember, especially under graphic styles, as well as some of the others, is that anytime you see the little library symbol, there's a bunch of them here. So if we select illuminate styles, for example, you can see that we have with this particular object selected, this background shape, I can select maybe aluminum. And if I want to add another one on top of that, remember, I can go ahead and I can select a brand new fill, and that will be on top. Now, I don't want the same one, but we can add maybe highlight. Okay. So some of these will work, some of them won't. So I'm going to undo. And I'm going to go back. And they want us to apply a couple of those. And every time you add one of those effects, or graphic styles, I should say, it will be added to your graphic styles panel. Okay. So one of the last things that we're going to add to this is the ferrule of the brush, just remembered, is we're going to apply a graphic style from the Illuminate library. Okay, Illuminate styles. And the first one that I applied was the aluminum highlight. And then every time you apply one of those, it will be added to your graphic style library, which I already said. Now here's the chrome. And you can see under the appearance panel that there are multiple fills that it applies. And as you turn each of these off, you can see what it's doing. Let's select this one. It's a very light fill at the top. Another larger fill with white there. It's on top of everything. And then beneath that is a gradient fill. And they're all three gradient fills is what they are. Now, if I come back and I select from up here, if I select this again, it just adds it. We don't need it. multiple times. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that one from our final library. I'm going to go back to the steel fill. And so we have really nice appearance of a stylized metallic ferrule here. I'm going to go back here and I'm going to move this down a little bit so that fits nicely. So we've worked with scaling objects to make sure that we scale strokes and fills and effects. We've added a pattern and a solid fill using the appearance panel. We've added multiple effects to our editable text. So again, if I select the direct selection tool or the selection tool, I can see that I added a warp effect, and each of these I can turn off, turn back on. I can select warp rise, and if I want a different one, let's select, for example, bulge, and try any number of these. It won't hurt the inflate. Some of them, you know, in certain situations work really, really well. But it's worth your effort to really go back and check some of these because they're all editable. And remember, with editable text, it remains editable, and you can apply these live effects. It's also important to note, and this is sometimes where I get hung up doing working with somebody else's artwork, the organization of the layers. So for example, with the, where I wanted the offset here, let's see where it was for the characters. We've got a drop shadow. Oh, I know what we want to do. There's one last thing that we're going to do here. I'm going to go ahead under and select the layer for the text. We've got, if I turn that off, notice that I said that you could apply an effect to an entire layer. So if I target the layer that has both of the banners on it, I can go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and just use this default drop shadow. And as soon as oh, that's not a drop shadow. That's not what I wanted to do. Let's undo that. Let's go ahead and I'm going to, with both of them selected, and I'm going to target the whole layer. I'm going to go up here. Let's try effects. Let's see if I can go ahead and add a drop shadow to this. Stylize, drop shadow. Yeah, there we go. So we probably want this instead of 10%. We can build this up a little bit. We can also maybe blur this a little bit more. I'm not using, you know, one from the book, but you can see that I'm building this up a little bit. And now you can see that the drop shadow has been added to both of the banners because I've applied it to the entire layer. So that was one last thing that the textbook wanted us to do that I had forgotten to do here. And that too can be very, very nice. We have graphic styles. So it's a combination of fills, strokes, effects that are all combined into one. I encourage you to look at the library of them so you can see how, you know, we have buttons and rollovers for web design, artistic effects, a whole bunch of them. They're really quite nice. And, you know, don't be afraid to select one of these and just say, okay, let's see what this one looks like. All right. And not so hot. So it doesn't look so great. So just undo, and it brings me back to where I was before. Let's go ahead and select this one and see what that looks like. That's kind of cool. It has kind of a nice artsy effect to it. And then what you do when you've applied any of these graphic styles is come over to the appearance panel and deconstruct what they have done. Okay, notice all the different fills, strokes. There's some really nice ones. There's actually some nice neon effects too that are pretty cool, where they have multiple strokes applied to a single path. What else have we got here? The offset ones I don't use all that much in terms of effects. But in this particular case, it worked pretty nicely. I think I would have taken the art and I would have applied a different drop shadow to it, because you can change the color of the drop shadow, you know. I can come in here, and if I double click on drop shadow, notice that it's a black drop shadow. So we can change the opacity of it and we can change the color of it. So let's try that for one last thing before I end my demonstration today. I'm going to go ahead and click here. And let's try a pink, for example. A nice lavender kind of pinky color. Okay. And so that is the color. Now let's go ahead and change the opacity of it and bring that up. And notice that the drop shadow has a totally different look and feel to it than what I had done before with a traditional kind of gray drop shadow. So I'll undo that and I'll bring it back to what we had. So I was thinking that instead of the green, we could have used that as a drop shadow and had no blur, had opacity 100%, rather than use the offset and multiply 10 times. I don't know that I would have done that. So anyway, deconstructing someone else's artwork and seeing how it works for us. So now we have the look and the feel of the finished product here. Again, working mostly with the appearance panel, but in addition to that, adding graphic styles from their library, applying various appearances to text, to objects, adding also a Photoshop effect for the brush that looks pretty nice. And you have it. There you have it. That's pretty nice. The whole thing. It's a great way. They get quite complex after a while, but I think they're worth looking into. They can make your illustration really dress it up quite nicely and enhance it considerably, and do it in, I think, in a very efficient and effective way, especially by using your appearance panel. So anyway, that's all we have for today, working with what I'm going to, I'll repeat some of this tomorrow probably, and then Wednesday I will do lesson 14, creating artwork for a t-shirt. And that's where we're going to use the, what are we going to use? We're going to, oh, I know what we're going to use. We're going to use the symbols tools. That's what we're going to do for that. Symbols are really pretty cool. Lots of cool features in here. It's, you know, trick is kind of remembering them all and using them, you know, when it's most effective to do so. Anyway, that's it for today. Remember that this is our last week. Your final project and all of the lessons will be due by the end of the week so that I can assign a final grade to all of you. And that's it. If you have any questions, please email me, or if you need me to set up a special individual webinar for you, we can do that as well. So I'm going to say goodbye, and I'm going to end my lesson for today and pause my recording, and hope everybody has enjoyed the class and is doing well with it. Okay. See you soon. Bye-bye.